So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Antonia, CEO at Euan's Guide, the Disabled Access Charity, and I'm delighted to be able to launch the results from our 2025 Access Survey. I identify as she, her. I'm a white woman with long dark hair, wearing a light green Euan's Guide hoodie, and I'm based in Edinburgh. A bit of housekeeping. We've got Nicole signing for us today, and there are captions enabled that you can turn on at the bottom of your screen. We're planning on uploading a subtitled recording of this session. For questions, there is a Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and we'll probably do these at the end. We've also had a fair few submitted already, so thank you very much. So on to the main event, the launch of the Euan's Guide Access Survey supported by the Motability Scheme. If you haven't already, please download the full results from euansguide.com/access survey. And the last thing before we kick off, I'd like to say a couple of thank yous. First, to the Motability Scheme. We simply would not get to hear from so many people without your support, so a big thank you. And also to the team that make this survey happen, some of whom you'll meet on the call today. But there are many, many others that have been working away in the background, sometimes for a fair few years, many of them volunteers, helping us to analyse and dissect all of the incredible data. Thank you very much. You know who you are. So today, this is the introduction. We're then going to be followed by David, who will be talking about the data, Joe, who will be talking about access, toilets, parking and transport, Pat and Molly, who will be talking about the accessibility time tax, Zoe and Claire will be finalising the session for us and telling us how you can help, and then time for questions. So, to kick off. Just one moment, sorry. I will add Dave. And I will add Nicole as well. So, Dave, you're from a company called Clear Impact, and you've been helping us look at the data in more depth and the impact of our work. I'm keen to learn from you what is so unique about the Euan's Guide Access Survey and what makes it so special.
Yes, so I think to have a survey like the Euan's Guide Access Survey is quite a unique opportunity that we should be paying attention to at a UK level, really. There's consistently over 4,000 responses every year, and there are some surveys that have huge sample sizes that include disabled people, like the British Household Panel Survey, for example. But as far as I can tell, and I have looked quite a bit, there's not another regular annual survey targeted at understanding the needs and experiences of disabled people with as large a response as this one. And it's run so efficiently. Usually, surveys of this size are produced by folks that specialise in surveys, the Ipsos Moris, the YouGovs, the NatSens, or an army of social researchers in an academic or government department. So this one has great support from the Motability Foundation and is delivered by a team of about 10 people at Euan's Guide, several of whom work part-time hours, who are just really committed to getting support and information and raising the profile of this issue. So there's probably no better single source of data about the needs and confidence and experiences of disabled people with transport, travel, and visiting places. And I think that's quite special.
You're muted, Antonia.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. So look, when we started the Access Survey over a decade ago, it was really designed to hear the voice of our community. And for day one, it's really proven the need for Euan's Guide. So it's been really interesting to work with you to understand the wider impact and the scale of the data. And I hope you're going to stick around to the end for any data related questions. So Joe, you're our community manager, and you're going to be talking us through what people told us in the access survey.
Yep.
So they told us lots of things about places they go, things they do, but we also heard lots about places people didn't go to and things people don't do.
Yep.
So the data shows that 42% of people will just avoid a venue entirely if they can't find access info online because they assume it is all inaccessible. And you've been calling this the silent rejection.
Yep.
Can you explain the importance and relevance of disabled access information and why it makes good business sense?
I can. Just before we get started, though, I'd just like to give a quick introduction. So, my name is Joe. I'm the community manager here at Euan's Guide. I am a white male with a shaved head and a beard. I use he, him pronouns, and I am wearing a Euan's Guide hoodie. I run a small team of disabled people, 3 of us in total, who travel the UK experiencing the challenges of disabled access in the weird and wonderful places that we go to. But to answer Antonia's question, when a business fails to share its accessibility information, this isn't just a minor oversight. It's a flashing no entry sign that means that you don't want me in your venue. And venues don't realise that they're actually turning away visitors before they even reach the front door. So I suppose one of my bigger questions is how much are businesses actually losing out of this?
Well, I think you talking about the purple pound. So it's the spending power of disabled people is commonly known as the purple pound, and the latest figures say that it is worth 446 billion pounds. I'll say that again, 446 billion pounds. So I know we've got lots of people on the call today. We've got museums. I know we've got hotels, hospitality venues, tourism organizations. So can you tell them what it means for their business?
Shortly, it means that I'm not coming. That's it. And many of the other 16 million disabled people across the UK won't either. And I can't see why businesses would let a massive market segment assume that we don't want their business. And you should remember that you don't have to spend lots of money to fix this. It's simply a case of listing your disabled access information on your own website. If you do that, people will see that their needs are considered and see that their time is respected. And this is how you give people the confidence to visit your business. And by also listing on Euan's Guide, people will be able to find your venue and share their thoughts. And best of all, it's free.
It's free, absolutely. So nearly half of respondents say that they do not feel confident visiting new places. In your view, what is the single biggest thing a venue can do to bridge that confidence gap?
Be honest. Like simply be honest about your venue's accessibility information and have it hosted in a place where people can easily find it. We live in a world where there's a common misconception that access starts and stops at wheelchairs, but this is just not the case. So, for instance, a venue that's upstairs might not be suitable for me as a wheelchair user, but it may be suitable for people with other impairments. So, if you make that clear and highlight the access features you do have, and of course be willing to learn, adapt, and change, you allow people to make informed decisions on the places they go.
One of the recurring themes that comes up in the access survey year and year and year in is always toilets. So some of the biggest challenges people tell us about are toilets. So from this year's survey, 84% of our respondents told us that they use accessible loos, yet 76% said that they've come across an accessible loo that they've been unable to use. And 60% say that they've had to leave a venue early because the accessible loo hasn't been as accessible as they need it to be. Now, why is the toilet the make and break factor for whether a person can visit?
Okay, I'll put it this way. If there's one thing that unites every single person on this planet, it's that eventually we'll all have to go to the toilet. Now, many people take it for granted that they'll have access to a loo wherever they go, but for many disabled people, that's just not the case. I often speak to people who tell me how they've either fasted or dehydrated ahead of a journey because they aren't certain that they'll be able to go to the toilet when they're out, and this, of course, is commonplace amongst people flying. If your venue, however, is known to have reliable and well-maintained facilities, you're encouraging inclusion.
And 45% of respondents told us that one of the biggest issues with accessible loos is that they're often used as storage. Now, what are the most common thing found in accessible loos?
Yep, so this feels like a sort of family fortune moment, where I get to say that from our survey, 78% of people told us they found cleaning equipment. 64% told us they found bins, waste, and overflowing rubbish, whilst 44% told us they find chairs, tables, furniture, and boxes. Now, one of the stories I always like to tell when I meet people for the first time, which may be a strange story to start with, is of a time when we ran a poll at Euan's Guide. And that poll was to find the most random things that people had found in an accessible toilet. Now, from that, we had answers such as a surfboard, a manager's office, which takes multitasking to a new level, and a Neil Diamond impersonator's dressing room. So if no one leaves this meeting today singing Sweet Caroline, then I've failed my job.
And I suppose the point you're trying to make is that when a loo, an accessible loo or a changing places toilet is used as a broom cupboard,
Yep.
it sends a clear message that they're not expecting disabled visitors, they don't want disabled customers,
I
and that
think
we're
it
not
sends
welcome.
I think it sends you more than that. So ultimately it's the message that we aren't welcome. But there's just that lack of dignity as well. If this is a space that you expect people to use, make it fit for purpose. And the fact is, if you don't keep your facilities in good condition through things like regular checks and cleaning, then you're not inviting disabled people to your venue. And this goes much, much further than storage. So even the loos that get this part right often make mistakes that have big impacts. So certain scenarios I've found is that I've been places where waste bins have been stored in transfer spaces, which utterly negates their use, so you aren't able to transfer to the toilet if you're a wheelchair user. The other thing that I quite often find is that there are complicated methods of actually accessing the toilet.
Mhm.
So I've been to an airport, for instance, where I had to pick up a handset to ask for a code to type it into a keypad to access the toilet. And I'm just trying to use the loo. I'm not trying to take part in some game show. So that's one of the biggest issues that I have, and I'm sure there's many people that relate to that as well.
And one of the other things our community are always telling us are about emergency alarms in toilets as well. So a surprising number of survey respondents told us that they had had to pull the red emergency cord in a loo. So 8%, I think it was, on 1 in 10.
Yep.
So I suppose we were talking about this earlier, and for anybody who's watching who doesn't know, that doesn't come out very clearly, we can send the link afterwards. We, Euan's Guide, worked really hard to try and educate people about the importance of the emergency red cord, and we do red cord cards. So just making sure that you often check that the alarm does work and that your team know what to do if they hear the alarm going off. I think what another phrase you said earlier was look after your loos and your customers will look after you. So I love that. And I think another hot topic that our respondents were talking about, again, often comes up year in year, is parking. So
Yep.
when asked what are the barriers to access that you commonly find when out and about, 64% told us that a lack of appropriate parking was a big problem.
Yep. So I would just say like the availability of accessible parking is often a deciding factor on whether someone will go somewhere or not. In some ways, it's actually similar to toilets. But if appropriate parking is not available, that alone can be a reason to exclude people. But when information on nearby parking is provided, that removes the guesswork. Like, I personally love it when a venue just has parking information front and centre because it tells me that they've thought about who might be coming and, more importantly, how they might get there. And to be honest, this information, if they have it on their website, the more detailed it is, the better. Because I often find that car parks have a limited number of accessible spaces or parking that is anything but accessible. With this, I'm referring to things like spaces without hatched markings, accessible bays that border standard bays, walls, or even payment terminals, or even someone simply painting a wheelchair symbol in the centre of a bay as though that makes it magically accessible. But if we know what to expect, that's half the battle, and it makes undertaking that journey a lot less brutal.
And a subject that I know is close to your heart as an electric vehicle driver.
Yep.
We had quite a lot of people giving us their feedback about EV charging in the survey. Tell me a bit more about that.
Well, the fact that 71% of people said no to that question speaks volumes. It's a small two-letter word, but it says so much to me. Now, it's the fact that there are over 100,000 electric vehicles currently on lease through the Motability Scheme. And even with that being the case, there are still many reasons why disabled people are reluctant to use EVs. This includes things like range anxiety, the concern over whether you have enough battery to get to where you have to go and back. There's also the challenges of installing accessible EV charging. So this comes down to things like people who may live in high-rise flats or simply don't have access to a driveway. What do we do in those cases? So those are considerations that people have. It's also the case that there's the cost and, of course, the accessibility of the charging itself. Now, on that last point, as a disabled driver, I've learned firsthand what those barriers are. And it was interesting because before becoming an EV driver, despite the fact I was a disabled person, I'd overlooked this. So it was almost like finding a new area where things were inaccessible. And in many ways, I would say it's frustrating that the infrastructure isn't being built as it should be. Like, this is new infrastructure, so I'd love to see it built properly with the view of including people rather than excluding people. But I've come across places where this isn't considered. So I've seen accessible parking spaces removed to install EV charging bays. So now I doubly can't use it. It's also the case that most bays are no wider than a standard parking bay. The charging terminals are raised on plinths, set in stones, or even restricted by things like bollards and fences. And this is clearly done to protect the machine, but it also removes the access to it. And there's also the fact that the weight of the charging cables has a general rule attached, and that rule is that the faster the charge, the heavier the cables. But that's not to say that accessible facilities don't exist. They do, and I like to highlight the ones that do.
Tell us, I'm glad you finished on that. It sounded all a bit doom and gloom for the moment,
Yep.
for the instant. Tell us tell us about a good EV charging spot.
Okay. I don't know how many other people on the call can say this, but I have a favorite EV charging location. That's a very niche thing. But the location I found was actually within the first 3 months of working at Euan's Guide, where I made a trip to Dundee. And on Clippington Road, there's an area called Dundee's Charging Oasis. Now, it's not sunny and tropical, which is not surprising. It's Dundee. But the oasis itself is great because it has bays that are wide enough to open the door on either side. There are rubber stoppers at the front, which give you enough space to move between your vehicle and the chargers. The chargers have cables provided, which is always a bonus, and there are support arms. If that wasn't enough, there's also a canopy and a water dispenser. So I think more places should try and be like this. And the fact that this venue exists shows that it can exist and that it should exist elsewhere.
Well, and it gets repeat business because you go there more often.
Well, that's it.
Makes perfect sense. Transport generally was a big theme in that access survey. 91% of respondents said that they used their car as their main mode of transport, whether that was owned or leased. 18% said bus or tram, and then it drops even further to 13% saying train or underground. Why do you think that is?
So I think many people would assume that the main reason for that is the comfort of driving and that you get to use your own vehicle, you get to go where you have to go without having to stop 47 times on the way there, and also you can build out share songs. I Believe in Love, probably a Life After Love is probably a favourite. But yeah, you have the opportunity to do that and no one can judge you. But I actually think there's more than that. I could personally spend the whole day here speaking about access barriers and everything that moves on wheels, waves, or wings, but nobody has time for that. But the fact is, public transport comes with challenges if you are a disabled person. So much of this is my experience, but I'm sure lots of people will be able to relate to it. So, for instance, when it comes to getting the bus, if another wheelchair user dares to get on the bus before me, then I may find that I can't board. If there's a buggy in the wheelchair space, despite wheelchairs taking legal priority, I may still not be able to board. And that, of course, assumes that in the first instance, the ramp to get onto the bus is operational. When it comes to trains, there's generally a requirement to arrange assistance ahead of time, and that assistance could fail to show up further down the line. It's also the case that the station you're using may not have a working lift. Now, when we look at the London Underground, there are a limited number of accessible stations along the route. 1 in 3 is stated to be accessible, but when we compare that to a place like Glasgow, where there are only 12 stops in total, only 2 are accessible. And when there isn't a suitable local station, we have to break our journey, we have to fill in the gaps, and that involves things like changing modes of transport, going overground to find your way to another line, or even making parts of the journey on foot or on wheels as needed. But again, that's not to say that every transport experience I've had is bad. I will say that when this works, it really works. But when the barriers are presented, they can limit you in massive, massive ways.
So, Joe, we've got 150 people on this call today. What are you asking them to do?
Review. So that would be ultimately my request here. The fact is, the more information we have on euansguide.com and the more information that you provide on your site, the wider you open the world to accessible to disabled people. You know, sometimes it is challenging being a disabled person. Sometimes it feels isolating that there are places you can't go. So find places that people can go to, or even become one of the places that people can go to, and you'll find people there.
Brilliant, thank you. I think we're going to be handing over to Pat and Molly to talk about the accessibility time tax. So just one moment.
Hi everyone, I'm Molly. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a review coordinator at Euan's Guide. I'm based in London. I'm a white woman with short dyed red hair. I'm wearing a teal coloured zip up hoodie with the Euan's Guide logo on it. And I'm also a wheelchair user.
Hi, my name is Pat. My pronouns are they, them. I work at Euan's Guide as a review coordinator also, and I'm based in Glasgow. I'm a white person in their 30s with glasses and short brown curly hair, and I'm wearing a teal Euan's Guide branded t-shirt. I'm an ambulatory power chair user, and I also have non-visible impairments.
So, like Antonia mentioned, Pat and I are going to be talking about the accessibility time tax, which was brand new for the Access Survey this year. Over 80% of people said that they spend 1 to 5 hours a week spending extra time on things that non-disabled people might not need to. That's at least 52 hours a year. And only 7% said that they don't spend any extra time on things. Time tax for me is all about the things I have to spend time doing that my non-disabled friends and family don't have to think about. Things like having to spend time planning accessible routes, booking assistance, leaving additional time on my journeys, waiting for assistance staff, even taking extra time for everyday things like washing, dressing, and getting in and out of the car. And that's just the time that I have control over too. Just this week, I was going to a museum in central London. When traveling around London on buses and the tube, I always leave at least 50% of the expected travel time to my journey. And in my experience, this usually covers the standard time tax that I've come to expect, like not being able to get on the first bus that comes or waiting for assistance. This week, however, once I reached my midway point, I spoke to staff via an information point and let them know that I was going to need a ramp to get off the train at my final destination. When they came to meet me, I was told that there had been an incident and the station I was travelling to would not be able to provide ramp assistance for at least half an hour, but that was likely to be much longer. Fortunately, I have a power attachment for my wheelchair, so I was able to look at options that included me travelling on wheel or foot to my destination. And that's what I opted to do because it actually turned out to be the fastest way to get to my final destination because the other stations in the area didn't have step-free access and the buses were going to be much, much slower. The rest of my journey should have been 5 more minutes on the tube and then a 10-minute wheel. Instead, I had to wheel 40 minutes and I ended up being late for my check-in time at the museum as well. So despite doing everything right, so to speak, my journey more than doubled what it should have.
That sounds so frustrating. And even just even just having to go further than you thought with a power attachment, like just that dread of seeing the low battery warning and just being like,
Ah,
will I just get stuck or will I actually manage to get
it
home
certainly
after
gets the
this?
heart going.
Yeah. Another transport example, but this time for air travel, which is actually another area where disabled people are just expected to sacrifice a lot of extra time, even when everything goes right. Although I do have an example, plenty of examples, but I'll share one where it did not go right. So, when you're traveling with a mobility device or you need assistance at the airport, even the best case scenario involves hours spent on admin and waiting. You need to fill out an extra section when booking your flight. Then you need to fill out another form or call a hotline to provide details on your device. And then you're asked for all of this information again at the airport. You need to be at the airport early to make sure that you can receive assistance in time for your flight. And then you have to stay on the plane until after everyone else is gone while you wait for someone to pick you up or bring you your wheelchair. And if you do not travel with your own chair, or you have to check in your device as oversized luggage rather than bringing it to the gate, you give up autonomy for at least an hour, probably two, and you're just deposited at the assistance point or at the gate according to how it fits in the schedule. And that's another point where you're just like, and how am I going to get to the toilet now? Maybe I'm hungry. I want the snack. No, you're just at the gate now until the plane comes. So, I mentioned I have my own fair share of experiences when flying that did not go smoothly, and the longest delay I've had so far came to 24 hours. It included a detour into the opposite direction and a night spent in a hotel. I wanted to travel to Germany to see my mom on her birthday, and I did everything I was supposed to do. I filled in all the forms with plenty of notice. I arrived at the airport more than 2 hours before departure, and I presented at check-in right away to get my powered wheelchair tagged. I had done it a dozen times before, so I expected to just get my tag, notify assistants that I could make my own way to the gate, and then someone would come and take my chair into the hold, and I could just head to security. Instead, I was sent back and forth between check-in and assistance multiple times, and I even had to watch other disabled passengers who were also waiting miss their flight because the airline and the assistant staff could not agree whose responsibility it was to fill in the tag on our mobility devices. And you just sit there and you can't do anything. And when my own flight was getting dangerously close, I finally convinced the staff to let me go. We rushed through security, only to arrive at an empty gate. I found that the flight had just left ahead of schedule, and no one seemed to have even notified them that there was a disabled passenger waiting at check-in. So in the end, there were no other flights from my to my destination for 3 days. So instead of a direct flight at midday, I ended taking an evening flight into the opposite direction, arriving at an airport hotel around midnight to ultimately take a connecting flight in the morning, and arrived the day after my mum's birthday, completely exhausted. But luckily, since it was a surprise visit, she wasn't too disappointed because she had not expected me. So,
That's a bonus, at least. At least there wasn't a disappointing birthday for your mum. And I think it's astonishing because almost every disabled person will have a story like ours, whether it's being unable to get into a toilet, getting stuck somewhere while traveling, or being turned away from somewhere because of their access needs. And the impact is more than just a delay to someone's schedule as well. 83% of the respondents of the Access survey said that the time tax makes them have increased stress or anxiety, and 69% said that they end up feeling more drained and tired because of their experience.
and I think that's perfectly illustrated in our examples.
Exactly. And I think that when you think about what we've just talked about, you can see why you would end up feeling like that. Like where I got stuck, not being able to get to that station. Of course, that travel disruption will have impacted everyone hoping to get to that station. However, the difference was because of the planning that I had already done. I knew that that was the only step-free station near my where I was going to, and so I was forced to travel a different route that was much, much longer. Whereas the majority of other people that had been planning on using that station could still use that station, but it may just have been a bit busier or their journey may have been a little bit delayed. I think the immediate impact of my experience was that stress, anxiety. Am I going to get there in time? Should I turn around and go home? I also, like you mentioned, had to travel much further and did, especially as I was coming home. I watched that battery get lower and lower and lower. I hadn't anticipated using that much of my battery on that journey. And in addition, I was out in the cold for a lot longer than I ever like to be. That cold has an impact on my disability. I get increased pain and increased tiredness. So that had a big impact. And by the time I did then get home, I was also late for work meetings. So the impact just has knock on after knock on after knock on. And we can see that in the access survey as well.
Yeah, and we also asked people about other effects, and more than half of the respondents said that they felt excluded or left behind because of the extra time that they have to spend on participating. And I'm not surprised by that at all, because almost as many people have actually missed opportunities because of the time tax. And it also negatively affects your relationships. More than a third said they have less time with family and friends. And just under a third fear that people will think worse of them for taking longer. And I totally relate to that. You mentioned you were late for work meetings, and I don't think I ever tell anyone the exact time that I'm going to be somewhere. I always couch it in some way or make sure to say, well, this is the time according to the plan, because it is so likely that I'm going to be sending at least one update while I'm on the way because I'm delayed by something. And I don't want people to think that I'm just keeping them waiting on purpose. Like, this is especially stressful when it comes to work situations. So I always build in a huge buffer because I'm worried about making a bad impression or seeming unprofessional. And even then, I don't always make it on time. And then I have to work late to make up for that. And when you're running late and you're not in control because you depend either on other people to assist you or on the wheelchair space not being taken up, you spend the whole journey in a state of such high stress that it can be really exhausting. And I've also had employers in the past threaten disciplinary action because of lateness that was related to the difficulties of traveling as a disabled person, as if I didn't prefer to be on time as well.
Yeah, that's so true. Ultimately, all we want is a smooth and simple experience, whether that's while traveling or in other situations. Um, Transport isn't the only place that we see the time tax at play. In the Access survey, 76% said that online booking systems would really help. Being able to book tickets online, book assistance and other services, and book facilities that they might need, doing that online would be so useful. For example, I love going to the theatre and concerts. And just last year, I had two events where I had the polar opposite of booking interactions. One, I phoned up, sat on the phone for an hour, waiting to find out if there were even any wheelchair seats still available for me. And the other, I queued up online just like everyone else. I was able to get in and see immediately whether there were any accessible seats, what their access was, and whether I could book them or not straight away. And then once I had booked those tickets, the venue contacted me and then had a discussion with me via email about what my access needs were. And it was a
So
really
great.
great experience. It was great. And I think that's an important thing to note. Time tax isn't something that's going to be eradicated. I will always need to spend additional time on certain things. I will always need to make sure that my access needs are being met. But what we want to do is raise awareness of the time tax that disabled people are facing and find ways of minimizing it and making it more convenient as well.
Yeah, because it doesn't have to be as high as it is now.
No,
And
it doesn't.
there, you mentioned there's really straightforward ways of doing that. And another, maybe even more straightforward way is just that providing of information that Joe also already talked about. So it doesn't only help with confidence, it helps with cutting down on that time tax burden. So 85% of survey respondents said that clear and accurate disabled access information would reduce this extra time that they would have to spend. And I completely agree. I was recently invited to a friend's hen party, and I spent probably an hour trying to figure out if there was a lift in the venue. I even looked at 3D models of it, and I still couldn't find out. And so the days leading up to it, I was just mulling it over, thinking, okay, what am I going to do if there's no lift? Could we do it this way or that way? And then when I got there, it turned out that there was a lift, but that information was nowhere to be found. So if that had been easily available, it would have saved me a lot of time and worry. So I just implore everyone to keep sharing about euansguide.com. You can share your own experiences. You can share about your venue's access, register your venue, leave a review, or even just tell other people about it. You won't only help out those people by giving them a really rich resource of good information, but they might also contribute with their own experiences, registering their own venue, and go on to tell more people about it. So it's really important. It's really simple. And Claire and Zoe, our volunteer coordinators, are going to tell you more about it.
Thank you, Pat, for that introduction. So, yes, hi, I'm Claire. My pronouns are she, her. I live in Dundee, which is sunny sometimes, Joe. I saw that comment earlier. Then I have blonde brown hair, which is in a ponytail today. I am a white female in her 30s. I am a full-time power chair wheelchair user, and I wear a nose piece mask that is connected to my BiPAP ventilator. And I'm wearing my tortoise Euan t-shirt with the logo here. And I'm one of the volunteer coordinators at Euan.
Hi, hi, I'm Zoe. I work as a volunteer coordinator alongside Claire. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a full-time wheelchair user. I have blonde bobbed hair, and I'm wearing a light green Euan's Guide hoodie today.
So Zoe and I are the first point of contact for new and current reviewers, volunteers, and ambassadors. We support people however they choose to help Euan's Guide, from submitting reviews to attending events and making accessible toilets safer. It's fantastic to see some familiar faces here today on our webinar. Looking at our latest access survey results, it's very difficult to read that 50% of our participants are feeling unconfident about visiting new places due to not knowing about the access when they'll arrive. Euan's Guide can help with this though. If everyone on this call was to leave 2 or 3 reviews on our website, thousands of people would be given the confidence to explore new venues when out and about. Everyone's experience is unique to them. Even if a venue has been reviewed already, we encourage people to share about their visit. Along with up-to-date information, our community tells us that trusted, first-hand and lived experiences are incredibly valuable. A review doesn't have to be bid. Mentioning getting to and around a venue, toilets within that venue, staff that you interacted with during your visit, and mentioning would you go back or would you recommend a visit to someone else will make a huge difference to someone reading your review. Zoe and I run monthly Zoom sessions to talk about how we can further get involved with Euan's Guide and what makes a good review on our website. If this is something you would be interested in, please keep an eye on our social media and newsletters for upcoming events. I'm now going to pass on to Zoe to talk about how venues to get involved with you instead?
Thank you, Claire. I'm going to give you some information about how venues can help disabled people today. So looking at the Access survey, then 47% of Access survey respondents told us that they find it difficult to find access information that they need to plan visits with family and friends. This is a huge audience that venues are missing out on. So by simply listing your disabled access information on your website and on euansguide.com, you are opening up your venue to thousands of disabled people who are looking for new and exciting venues to visit with their family and friends, as well as keeping your social media and website up to date with current events and access information. By listing on euansguide.com, you are showing disabled people that they are welcome in your venue and you're interested in what they have to say. So if you are a venue owner or manager of a physical place that disabled people can visit, I'm asking you today to take a few minutes to list your disabled access information also on your website, but on euansguide.com, to give disabled people the information that they need. Also, by opening your venue to disabled people, you're giving them the chance to give you vital feedback on what they think of your venue. So this is direct feedback from people that know disabled access better than anyone else. So if this is something you're interested in today, please visit our website and click on the List Your Venue tab. It only takes a few minutes, it's free, and you will be opening up your venue to tens of thousands of disabled people. Thank you very much for listening.
Sorry, couldn't find the unmute button. So thank you very much all. We have lots of questions in. So before we just get to those, I want to say thanks to everybody, both attending, guests on the call, but also the team. Thanks very much for sharing your experiences and the two takeaways. So everybody on this call can do something. If you can share your experience of disabled access, please go and do it. Like I said, there's 150 of you here. That would be amazing. Likewise, we know there are lots of venues here. If you work at, own, run, work with venues, get listing on Euan's Guide. It's free. You can do it now. Don't wait to be perfect. Some information is better than anything. And actually that leads right into the first question, which I was potentially going to give to Joe, if that was okay. Joe, you're an access auditor yourself. There are questions here about access audits and how they complement Euan's Guide. Would you like to take that first question?
Yep. So just sort of tying back to our earlier conversation about the value of access information from disabled people, we aren't saying that this information supersedes or is a reason not to have an audit. If you are an organisation that has the funds for that, then great. We'd love to have that access information out there. Even relating to organisations like Access Able, who we know pretty well. We're friends. There's no competition there. But really, we just want to do what we can to ensure the access information is out there. So audits definitely have their place. They're absolutely valuable. But having information from disabled people listed on Euan's Guide is vital, because if we have that lived experience, we know that it's voices we can trust. I think the comment I always make is audits are great, but the minute I leave that accessible toilet, it could become a broom cupboard the next day, which is something we spoke about a wee bit earlier.
Thanks very much. Molly, you have been asked one directly. Can you name and glorify that venue you were talking about that does ticketing so well?
Yeah, of course. It was my first experience with them. It was the Roundhouse in London, I had a great experience both pre the event and post the event. They got in touch and proactively offered me parking on site. So yeah, I really highly recommend. If you're thinking about seeing something there, I do really recommend it. They were great from booking right through to making sure that I was leaving the venue safely. Although I would say, without wanting to appear too biased, I think ATG seem to also be making really good strides. It's not perfect because I think it is dependent on each theatre's booking system, but they do seem to be making really good strides to make the process much simpler as well. So I do think there are places that are working hard to make that as easy as possible. But yeah, certainly Roundhouse are top of my list to go back to at the moment.
See, we're already talking about repeat custom just from making some small adjustments. So yeah, brilliant. Great. Here's another one. This is an easy one. Can I send these results to my MP? Yes, please do. Please share far and wide. euansguide.com/access survey. The more people that they get in front of, the better. So yes, please do. And not quite so in a bit more pessimistic. Maybe Molly, you might want to take this one as well. Only 16% of people think access is improving. That feels very low. Does the team feel optimistic or pessimistic about 2026?
It's really interesting. I joined Ewan's Guide partway through last year, so it was about halfway through. And I would say that 2025, I did feel very pessimistic about accessibility in the UK. It felt like things were being overlooked or left behind. And I may be biased, but I think joining Viewing Need has had a real impact on seeing the work firsthand that is going into making things more accessible. And I really do feel very optimistic about 2026 being a more positive year for access.
Great, thank you. Pat, I can see you smiling. Would you like to jump in on that one too?
Yeah, I think it really is that aspect of community that I can feel optimistic about, because I feel pretty pessimistic about a lot of the systemic and institutional things and the state of accessibility and ableism, to be fair, as well in those areas. So yeah, I think COVID has had a big impact on the state of accessibility as well. While there were positive developments, like it being way more commonplace to participate remotely and that being able to include more disabled people, there's also just a lot of people who have to still shield, who are still stuck in their homes and who are just watching the world forget about them, seemingly, as we're not taking precautions that are necessary to preserve their life and their health. So, but what I then feel really positive about is that there are people who are saying, no, we haven't forgotten about you, that there are grassroots efforts, community efforts that make sure to keep people included, to make events that are truly accessible, for example, because they're also COVID safe. And yeah, that makes me feel more positive, and that's sort of why I'm excited to be part of this as well, to be part of Euan's Guide, to that I'm part of a team that doesn't just say, let's just ask for things to get better and wait for that. So let's do whatever we can to fill that gap in the meantime. Sure, institutional and systemic change is needed, is necessary, and would be amazing. But until we get there, let's just help each other out and do it as a community.
Thanks, Pat. Joe, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, as a
Billy.
fellow Glaswegian, of course, I. So I think the question sort of, well, as you said, it is two parts. But I think one of the bigger things we can do, of course, is bring it to the attention of the venue. Now, a lot of us are confident enough to go up to that front desk and tell someone, look, this is something that we need that's not being provided. Your toilet is unsafe. But some of us can't do that, and that's utterly fine. It's capacity, it's the confrontation. But if you were, for instance, leave your review on Ewan's Guide, we actively reach out to the venues to make them aware of what people are saying. And this goes both for venues who have listed themselves or venues that people have added on. So the initial way to sort of to do that is to get the attention on the venue via us or, of course, the venue directly. But I think other than that, if there are other people, then there is power in numbers, and that's something that I'd like to say, is if there are other people using those facilities that encounter these same problems, or if you actively speak to them, it means you can come together and actively pursue that change. But I'm with you, Billy. It's really frustrating when you go somewhere and something that is such an essential safety facility isn't there.
Thanks, Billy. Keen to kick on. I'm getting more questions than I can keep up with. A couple of really fast ones. Somebody's asking about, have we heard about the Arts Council England endorsed all-in scheme? Yep, I would hope that there may even be a couple of people on the call today from that. Had some very exciting conversations and hope to be working with them in the future. Had a brilliant recommendation from, I'm afraid I'm not going to be pronouncing your name right, Despanena, who says that Madingley Hall near Cambridge is the perfect venue for a couple of days breakaway. So please review. Looking forward to seeing a review of Madingley Hall near Cambridge on Euan's Guide soon. Maybe one for the review crew. So Molly, Pat, Joe, there's a museum here asking for ways to recommend, ways to encourage reviews. We've had a Euan's Guide listing for a while and shared the link on our socials, but we still haven't had any reviews. And Molly, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I think there's a few ways you can do it. I think if you're putting, like we've mentioned, supplementing what you've got on Euan's Guide on your own website, wherever you've got that information listed, you can then also link to your listing on Euan's Guide and promote that. There are also ways to show, once you do start getting reviews, you can embed your reviews on your website as well. So that's something that you can do to highlight that you're on Euan's Guide. So that's something you can do. I think posting on your socials is really important. Even a quick share to your story, have a look at us on Euan's Guide. It helps people see that you're thinking about access and you're encouraging access needs within your venue as well. And then that might make people see that and go, oh, I've been thinking about going. And actually they are accessible in lots of ways that I didn't know about. So that's something that is really useful to do as well. I don't know if anyone else has got any
Yeah,
thoughts on
and
it.
you've mentioned that you've been doing a lot of stuff online, but to be honest, like do it at your venue and do it in person because the people who are having an experience that they could review, they are at your venue. So I've been to museums before where they've had some posters up and they say, "Hey, look, we're on Ewan's Guide and you can review us as well. How was your experience? Let us know via this." You could put a wee QR code and people can just scan it right there and give you feedback.
I'd also just ask, I can't see the question, unfortunately, but I'd like to know what the venue is. Between all three of us, we do travel the UK reviewing disabled access in the places we go. So if there is a place, even if you want to add it just as another question in there, it mightn't be the case that we're swinging by and we'd be more than happy to pop in and have that experience. If not, we do have an ambassador network. We have people across the UK too. So it may even be the case that the venue is of interest to them. So there's ways to do that as well. But ultimately, I think Molly kind of hit the nail on the head, is encourage reviews. So it's great that you have the listing, but if people aren't aware of the listings or in person, they may not think to go online. They may have had a brilliant time and left knowing that, told everyone about it, but not realised there's an avenue they can tell even more people about it. So yeah, signpost that. And if you'd like, we can send you out any sort of leaflets, red cord cards, literally anything that highlights the fact that you're on Ewan's Guide.
We said we would try and finish by 3. It's 2 minutes to 3. So I just wanted to finish by saying a massive thank you. The first time we've done a webinar to launch the results, so delighted to see how many people are here. And we've been delighted with the number of downloads this morning, the number of people talking about it on social media. Please do go and share it. And as so many of my colleagues have said, please go submit reviews. Please start talking about your venue. So thanks very, very much, everybody, and hopefully be speaking to you soon in whatever guise that may take.
Before we wrap up, just quickly, I'd just like to highlight the venue mentioned was Colchester Castle. So if anyone's swinging by, please pop by.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everybody. Bye.